there is a call to order to this meeting right now. And who is keeping roll for us on these JEDO meetings? Anyone in particular? Is because we don't have staff, I think, working, except maybe Trey. Maybe you can keep the roll for us, so that way you can report to the mayor's office.
Yes. So roll call: Deputy Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmember Lesser.
Here.
Commissioner Mays.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you very much. Also, Trey, I hope that you're able to keep track of the minutes and some of the discussion that's going on, so that can be relayed to the mayor. These are non-action items. As I was saying previously to coming on air, that this task force came about after some discussions at the last special meeting of the JEDO board. Commissioner Mays, along with Councilman Lesser and others, agreed that it was necessary to put some focus on relief for some of our small businesses in our community. Some relief has happened. I know some of it we were not tentative about, but we're expecting another stimulus bill. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't act before we got that information. And so now we want to move forward, and Glenda Washington with the Greater Topeka Partnership provided some very good information along with Molly Howie at that special meeting. And I think if we could, for those who are watching right now and maybe weren't able to be at that special meeting or view it, and ask for both Commissioner Mays and then Councilmember Lesser to speak to their intent for this task force and help us move forward with that discussion before we get into any presentation from Ms. Washington. Commissioner Mays.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this plan, or I guess lack thereof at this point, the concept of this came to me as businesses were getting their hours cut. Some businesses had gone under. I know that there are a lot of them that are behind on rent or taking out loans in order to survive. And what I keep hearing, or at the time had been hearing quite a bit of, is that maybe the PPP and things like that have been approved by the federal government weren't necessarily as helpful for small businesses as it was for some of the larger businesses. And so there were some that felt that maybe they had fallen through the cracks. And so in an effort to keep some of our small locally owned businesses afloat and moving forward to hopefully survive the pandemic and be around for a long time, I felt the need to perhaps use some of our economic development money to help them out, because I do see that as economic development. So the mayor was suggested to be on this. She was actually not at the meeting either, if I'm not mistaken. And Commissioner Cook, who was the chair at the JEDO meeting then, suggested that because JEDO was transitioning to the city at the beginning of the year, that perhaps the mayor serve in this capacity rather than him. So that's how you ended up here. We've obviously had some scheduling difficulties getting everybody together. And so here we are today. I did send out a document to everybody that was just sort of something that I had typed up that had some concepts. And then I had sent that to Glenda last week. She had asked some good questions. And so my hope is that we can address some of those things today and iron out some of the details of what we see moving forward from here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilman Lesser, you have some comments before we get into discussion?
I don't have a whole lot of comments. I concur with everything that Commissioner Mays had said. The little bit of the difference at this point for me is since we made the decision to form this task force, shortly thereafter, the stimulus bill was approved, and the vaccine has started being utilized in our community. Our numbers are going down, so you would hope that we're continuing to start towards a recovery. But yeah, I certainly obviously support assistance with small business. I think some of the things that I would want us to address is a definition of what are we saying when we say small business? Are we saying 20 or less, 10 or less, 50 or less? What are we doing that? I would, my intent on this program is for it to be, quite frankly, fairly narrow and significantly vetted on who is able to receive assistance. My first thought is if you're eligible for a PPP loan and receive that, this is not a program that you're going to be able to benefit from. That's just a thought, as far as a parameter. And then I think one of the other things that I voiced is when we initially came up with the concept was I want to help where we can help, where we can keep businesses in business and employees employed. But I do want a vetted process that I'm not interested in the ship that's going down and just delaying the ship from going down for a short time if it's already going that direction. So I'm eager to see what we can come up with under those type parameters. And that's kind of the way that I see us moving forward, at least as far as my interpretation.
Thank you, Councilman. I too have some questions about who has already received funds and support, and if a second round is something that they would not necessarily need, and be able to then shift those funds to what may be small businesses. And again, the definition of what is that with regards to a small business, so that more people or more businesses that are still viable and still have a future, that we can assist them in their needs. And I've heard that there are people or businesses that are falling through the cracks, and I'm going to talk about what those cracks are, and maybe Ms. Washington can help identify that. If there are specific industries, obviously, that are suffering more than others, so that we can do what we can to address that. And so I'm pleased to sit in on this conversation. And maybe we can start then with Glenda, if you would provide, I think, the base for our conversations, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Deputy Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, and Shane. How are you? Let me pull up. Can I share, Shane? Am I able to share something on the screen? Do you know? I'm going to try, okay?
Can you get that, Trey?
Did I say Shane? I meant Trey.
You're fine.
I apologize.
I know. I'm not in control. I'll work with city admin on that.
Okay.
You need me to walk down?
Is it showing now?
Got it now.
Okay. Thank you so much. So good morning, everyone. I want to really go through all of the first of all, go through all of the incentives that we have or the loan programs that we have in the county and the city, and also through the chamber. First of all, we had the host. The host was stood up by private sector funding. We last year issued $710,000 through gift cards and financial support through that private sector piece. The host too was the one that you all approved through JEDO, provided $500,000, approximately $500,000 through that host program, and then the small business incentive program, which we have going all of the time, added another $429,000 to total about $1.2 million, and that was with some other numbers, we kind of worked through to make sure that we were covering all of the small businesses that we possibly could. We have a first opportunity loan fund here at Go Topeka, and we've had that for probably about 8 years. And we only had one loan, as you can imagine, during the 2020 year, but we have about $680,000 in that loan pool. The city of Topeka has received some money from HUD, and city manager could probably validate this, but we have about $860,000 that was issued by HUD, and an additional maybe $500,000 coming from HUD to support small businesses in the community.
That's accurate.
Is that accurate? Thank you.
Yeah.
The county worked with me on a business continuity plan loan grant program, and that was about $800,000 that she gave me to through the Sparks program to distribute through the community once they had completed a business continuity plan. And so we did issued about 61 grants through that fund. And then on locally, there's a Shawnee Startups program that will lend up to somewhere between $35,000 and $75,000 a year. The state has several small business programs, and they had also some quick turnaround programs that a lot of our county and the individual business owners in our community missed. So it was a statewide program, but I'm not sure who you could say in our community took advantage or had access to that money. The Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL loan are the programs that are the federal programs, and you all were talking about those programs. So they did reissue money through those programs, but they kept basically the same policies or the rules, and you still left out those same people that you left out before. So they didn't change anything to fit or to accommodate some of those people that had missed the opportunity to participate in these federal programs. For example, if you were a startup, you could not participate in any of the federal programs. And that kind of hurt a lot of our businesses. We had a lot of businesses start last year. Right now, they're suffering and asking, what can you do to assist us? Where's our aid? We pay taxes too. And so that's one of the things that we have to look at. And then the micro businesses, the smaller businesses, we have to pay close attention to them as well. Small businesses, you all wanted a definition, and the definition I was using was 50 or fewer employees with some of these funds. So we can determine whether we want to stay at that level of 50 or fewer employees, or if we want to boost that up, however you see it supporting the small business community here in Shawnee County. Again, strong support for small businesses last year, but we still missed a lot of them. And so we've just got to be intentional about making sure that we go out and we dig for those businesses that are out there hurting and we don't know it. So any questions, please?
Glenda, if I may, you speak about being intentional about finding those businesses that were left out, as it were. How is that best done? I mean, like now, do you have what would be a list of those businesses that applied and were not able to meet the requirements?
We actually only had one or two that did not meet the requirements, and when we requested additional information, we did not get it. And we had somebody that could probably help them package their piece, but there were only one or two. Now, in the business continuity plan, however, that program had about 25 to 30 individuals that did not complete their information. But we were able to use all of the funds that we were given for that program. When I talk about being intentional, I mean, I know that there are businesses out there that are afraid to have anything to do with state, federal, or local government. How do we bring them to the table is what we all should be working on. How do we make sure that they stay, because they're viable in their own communities? How do we make sure that they stay alive?
Thank you. And I understand that because when you get emails and phone calls from people saying that, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you take care of small business? Oftentimes, I wonder if their communication with the resources like yourself and others has been complete or sufficient, or to make a general statement like that without really going into some detail about what effort the business itself made to your body to get that information. Like you said, some of it, you asked for additional information and you didn't get it.
Yeah, well, and when we started at the beginning of the Host 2 program, the public program, we want to make sure that we reach out to everybody. So we had city council people working on bringing people in. We worked with LULAC, we worked with other organizations within the African-American community. We looked everywhere we could to make sure that those businesses would come to the table. And a lot of them simply did not want to for some reason, but they still needed the help. And we just got to figure out what that reason is. And I'm sure there's a trust factor, just making sure that that they trust what we do, and that our goal is not to do anything to put them in jeopardy, but to support them and help them grow, help them maintain during this period.
Thank you, Greg.
Deputy Mayor.
Any questions for Brenda?
The only kind of thing that I would want to point out that is the second stimulus bill did in fact, where I would disagree, did in fact open up additional areas. It opened up areas to childcare,
nonprofits,
theaters, live theaters, those type of things. And then the other two things that it did do is it actually, if you could show a loss, gave you the opportunity, I think it's 25% to submit for a second round of funding, as well as opening up some additional loans that were available to entities that weren't available before, and that's where I there again, that's where I talk about where I agree with Glenda on intentional, but narrow, because the problem with the first stimulus. The major problem that I saw with the first stimulus plan was we had federal stimulus, we had numerous companies eligible to get PPP loans, which, the other change is they have now ruled that not only are they forgiven, but you also don't have to pay taxes on those as well. You know, so, you know, where, yeah, it's great, it's forgiven, but you received a, you know, $200,000 loan, now you don't even have to pay income on that. So, and the problem though is there's way too many businesses, I won't name any of them obviously, but too many businesses that receive significant PPP loans that they were able to get forgiven that now are not tax-free, and actually we're making a profit during that point in time, you know? And so thus the change this time that you have to show a loss to get another, you know, second round if you already receive one. So those are all the things that there again, what I'm trying to say in specifically is I absolutely want us to use this money. I absolutely want to, you know, help small business. I know everybody else does here, but I'm, you know, for my approval, this thing's going to be intentional. You know what I mean? It's going to be who needs it, how you qualify for it, and if you've been eligible in the past, we need to evaluate to what extent you're eligible for this program.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? City Manager?
One of the things that I would say is I pulled up the list. I don't have the most updated one. I'm due for a new update soon on things that happened for businesses that weren't provided funding. And our program had some limitations, 25, certain income levels. And so like I had a CD Trade Post applied, but they were over 25 employees. Alicia Z Creations, which is Alicia's Creations. They weren't in business before it started. Debbie's Styling Salon was over the income. Associated Management Services over the income. Jenny's House Cleaning denied over the income. A couple of them weren't located in Topeka. One, the proposed use of funds. So those are the kind of things that and then one didn't show a loss of income due to it. So those are the types of things that we saw for reasons that, you know, they weren't accepted into our program.
One of the biggest concerns out there is for the people that started businesses last year. They really have been hurting. They are not eligible for any of the federal loans. And that would probably take them to the next level if they were. They can't get EIDL or PPP because they started in March, April, or May.
And you like that as well.
Yeah. And so they are out there kind of lost trying to figure out, okay, who helps us stay in business? What is our role as recipients? And so that's really, you know, when we think about it, that's really how deep we need to think is there are several people that started businesses that are not eligible for any help, but they are out there working. They invested their money and they built their buildings and they renovated their building and they hired people, but they're not eligible for federal funds.
Let me ask a question just from a consensus basis, because I think that's how we kind of have to go with some of this stuff as we get started. Don't you think, Glenda?
Yeah.
Two questions are, I think, do we have a consensus that we want to view small business as 50 or lower? I'm asking, I'm not recommending, I'm saying, is that where a general consensus is for us?
Yeah, so just to kind of back up just a tiny bit, there was a list that we came up with at the full JEDO meeting of about 5 different points that we felt needed to be addressed in this task force. And so I think probably a good place to start would be to just kind of go through that point by point, which is, if you guys got that document that I sent out, I sent it in a reply to the invitation to this Zoom meeting. I kind of basically just wrote those down and kind of where I thought we were headed. But yeah, I mean, 50 I kind of think 50 full-time employees, because I feel like there are some, like maybe some sports bars and things in town that might be over 50 employees, but some of them work a couple hours once a week and that kind of thing. And so my thinking was full-time employees, but I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with what you're just saying is full-time equivalent, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And think about this now, if you're trying to help restaurants and you're trying to help bars, most of those people won't have the full-time employees. They'll have part-time employees. They're not open, long enough to have that. So consider what we decide upon when we talk about full-time or fewer. I don't know if there are any out there, but just think.
I think I agree with Aaron. I think what he's saying is full-time equivalent, aren't you, basically?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we want to make sure is that this is for small, locally owned businesses. That's my intent, at least. So I had initially proposed the idea of making it only available to businesses that are owned by residents of Shawnee County. And then also for small businesses that are under 50 full-time employees. And then I had gone on in that document and spelled out some specific industries that I felt would be in more need than others, I would say. That would be food and beverage industry.
Do you want to pull
lodging,
that up for you?
Yeah.
I can pull it up, I think. Hold on.
Yeah, if you've got it, that'd be great.
While she's pulling it up, I had two questions. The first one I had was the 50. Aaron, that was the first question I had. The other question I have, I'm just throwing it out there though, is do we also want to consider there being a threshold of a minimum number of employees to be eligible?
I actually considered that, and I think that might be a good idea, because I kind of feel like maybe a one-person shop might not necessarily be. I think there's a lot of those out there, and they may not be in a position where they necessarily need this because they typically are running with a very low overhead.
So consider this as well. You have sole proprietors with independent contractors working for them in their facility. So they still get the same usage. So Councilman Lesser, what's your?
I'm sorry.
What's your opinion on that? You have.
I understand that. Yeah, I do understand that. I'll break that down a couple different ways.
Yeah.
I also though see sometimes some of those type of operations that are running basically as sole proprietors. They're using independent contractors and they're pushing off the expenses of their workers' comp, of their brick and mortar, all those type of things. They're not paying payroll taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And then they may be competing with a company that actually has, I mean, let's just use this. I'll use an example with no names, but let's say we have ABC Roofing Company that works out of his house, does not have a building, that 1099s all his labor for his roofing and pays no payroll taxes, no, et cetera, et cetera. And he's competing with CKK Roofing that has 10 employees, that has a storefront brick and mortar, and he's paying payroll tax, he's paying property tax, he's paying, et cetera, et cetera. And so and I just use that as an example with other ones. And, no, do I want, I don't feel that this program should be providing assistance to ABC. I think it should be providing to DDD, That's where I'm at, regardless of the industry. Aaron,
Aaron, your thoughts?
I'm fine with that. I mean, if we want to set a minimum of, I don't know, three full-time employees, something like that, that at least I think kind of gets rid of that possibility. But I mean, that's up to you guys. So, I mean, I'm fine with setting a minimum.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out. You know what I mean? I'm just throwing it out there as, you know, I'm throwing it out there as, is it something we want to consider? I mean,
Or even if we just said how many number of W-2 employees, whether they're full-time or not.
That's good.
But if they have at least 3 W-2 employees, I mean, then at least we know that they've got expenses, they're employing members of the community, that kind of thing. So,
exactly. I kind of like that idea, and I absolutely get Glenda's point, and it's a good point. Those people though also aren't providing health insurance for their employees, or not, you know what I mean? Those type of things. So there again, that just kind of goes to this narrowness of what I want it to be is small business companies that are employing people, incurring, those type of expenses. Otherwise, we almost kind of create this. Is that going to get passed on?
yeah.
So
in looking at those targeted industries, what do you guys think about those?
Are you asking us or?
Yeah, absolutely. Those were what I came up with on my own, but I'm sure there are some that are not included, or some that perhaps you guys see as things that don't need to be on there. So
I think, I think food and beverage. I think lodging. You kind of have to explain to me a little bit what you're meaning when you're saying sports events and entertainment. The other ones, I'm a little vague on what you're meaning, on that. So I'll let you kind of maybe give me a little bit of what you're thinking there.
Well, sports, I mean, part of our most recent health order was to basically stop organized sports in Shawnee County. And I know that there are a few businesses that struggled through that run leagues and things like that. And so my intent was I know that, it's hard to pay your bills when you're not getting any revenue at all. So that was why sports was on there. Events, I was thinking some of the event venues that.
Let me back you up. Let me back you up so I understand it. I'll kind of go one by one. So sports, you're saying like a sports zone or places that hold tournaments and leagues, and is that kind of what you're thinking there?
Yeah, I wasn't going to name any specific names, but yes, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay. Thank you.
And then entertainment, obviously it'd have to be locally owned is my thinking, but there are some live music venues, theaters, that type of thing that obviously has not been able to function. And then, events, I'll go back to that. That was what my thinking was, event venues. There's a lot of places around town that hold weddings and rent out for conventions and things that are, a lot of them are locally owned businesses that, still have the overhead of a mortgage or a rent payment, and are not seeing the revenues because of the mass gathering limitations that, you can't have a 500 person wedding right now in Shawnee County. And when that's your only source of revenue for your business, I feel like that's something that those businesses probably need a little help. And my guess is that they were not big recipients of PPP funding because they probably don't carry a ton of payroll. So that's kind of where I'm at. Obviously, the travel industry has been affected as well. But again, I go back when I say lodging, I'm not thinking of a Marriott applying for this money. I'm thinking of, a small local business essentially. So,
And would travel in, one of the things we see, would travel, are you talking, limo services, those type of things that are hurt? Would that be
yeah,
included
I mean,
in
that would be something that probably would be appropriate for that. Maybe I should say travel and transportation, maybe transportation.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I want to get back to the part where you talked about maybe even a minimum number of employees. What's for my enlightenment, what's a micro business?
Micro
You
business.
mentioned that.
Yeah, a micro business is 5 or fewer. And you mentioned 3 employees. It takes a while to get 3 employees. I would say I know a husband and wife team that have been doing it for a year and a half, and it's still just the 2 of them trying to make it. And so that leaves them automatically out. So if you're looking at micro business and you want to support those micro businesses, that would be, one example.
Okay.
Well, I guess maybe when we're looking at that though, do we want to include home-based businesses? I mean, that's, if somebody's, I guess, when I look at these event venues, I think a lot of those are husband and wife teams that, have renovated a building or something to that effect. And then, maybe hire a catering company to come in and do the food and stuff without actually hiring employees. So I could see that, but I don't know that a home-based business is necessarily going to be what we're looking for. I don't know. I mean, you're right, though. I could see 3 employees being a barrier for some of those folks. So maybe 2 employees.
Mm-hmm.
I just asked the question because in conversations with city manager, I know one of the struggles, and it's been mentioned here, is businesses that started up last year, just before or right in the middle of the pandemic lockdowns. Those, on the one hand, it's really encouraging to see people really wanting to take that risk even during these struggling times and open a business in our city. But because they took that risk, I think there should be a way for them to be able to qualify for some assistance without being, because they're not able to show their loss and so forth, like other businesses that had been established prior to January 1. So they kind of get left out of everything. And I can't think that their loss is any less important than those who have been established for a while. So
I agree.
Yeah, that's something I really want to look at.
Yeah, I intentionally didn't say only existing businesses, and I feel like if we jumped ahead kind of to the eligibility requirements, I kept it relatively vague about they need to show a loss of some, how have they been affected by COVID? And I don't think that necessarily we need to have the same kind of overly detailed criteria that the federal government uses, because I don't anticipate us getting, inundated with requests on this. I think this is going to be, these are businesses that most of the people on this panel would be familiar with, probably, that, we could, let them explain why they feel they need it. And if we don't feel it's justified, then, obviously they would get denied the request with a reason. But that would be sort of what I said is just a hardship documentation. And maybe Glenda, you want to be more specific than that, but you know, I feel like what we've seen before is that folks that probably deserve the grant funding or loans that have been issued in the past were ineligible because of some small criteria that they didn't meet. Whereas some business that's got somebody on staff that's really good at grant writing, you know, finagles their way in there. And so I think that, you know, if they show some sort of a hardship and can explain why they're justified in receiving it, that's what I'm looking for.
I would agree. And real quick, I don't know how I didn't get this. Aaron, if you could today, send this to me again. I didn't get it. And you didn't get it either, Mike?
No.
Yeah, I think Maze is lying, but if
I'll do it real quick, Aaron.
yeah, you know, you know, and Glenda can speak to this too, but yeah, the in business and opening it up now, you know, just opening up this year and stuff like that, and the criticism those companies may get or what. The reality of that is a solid, you know, a solid startup that, you know, opened during this pandemic, started that process long before and started incurring costs, you know, long before. And, you know, some of them either had to make a decision, yeah, let's roll with this and go. And then other ones didn't. But yeah, it's certainly, you know, most of those companies have done, you know, and I feel for those companies. So yeah, I would want I would want startups to be considered, and I would not want there to be a time in business, you know, requirement, because I don't know that that's necessarily fair for the guy that, you know, started remodeling, you know, 6 months before the pandemic, got everything, you know. I think we need to want to include those. And I think you guys both feel the same way on that.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the document, Aaron. I think you've hit in those targeted industries, those that, at least for me, I've received communications about that they would fall into those areas there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a good doc. I had not seen that before yet. Honestly, Tara did a good job on that.
Whatever. All right. So if we go down to the grant amounts, are you guys fine with $1,000 to $10,000? And how do we decide, you know, what the amount is that they receive? I mean, do we want to base it on their, you know, their fixed costs of their business on a monthly basis? Do we want to just...
I'd like to have some more time to think about that and maybe discuss, you know, think through that. I kind of would want Glenda's input too. I don't have a problem with it being at 1,000 at you know, as a minimum. I would probably rather the max, you know, the maximum be 25,000. Honestly, but you know, then that brings the other conversation though, is I personally want these reviewed. I mean, my personal thought on this there again, where I talk about the narrowness is having the parameters, et cetera, and then, you know, my first thought was I would rather have the award be the award amount and approval be actually done by the committee of how, you know, how we do that. Honestly, I'm not, especially when we're going to have a range. You know, I think there has to be. I just want that oversight, to be honest with you. I know the problem is then you start thinking of, people, and I'm fine with, I'm fine with the criticism. I don't really give a shit, of it, the politics of, who gets it, who doesn't, that's fine. I'll take that heat, but I think we got to look at it and decide, okay, yeah, we actually want to give this person this, and here's why. And this one gets 25 because here's the impact on it. They got this amount of employees. They pay health insurance. I think all those different things.
Are you talking about economic impact of the business itself? How many employees it has, those kinds of things?
I think that should be a weighting factor. Yeah.
So that might be something that Freddie could work out with us
Sure.
to figure out that the economic impact of a business, of that particular business in that industry, and do it that way. But one of my suggestions is to look a little closer at the $1,000. That's really low, and I don't know what impact that would make on a business at this moment. Kind of consider, anywhere from $3,000 to whatever the max is going to be, but $1,000 is
Okay. Let's raise that up. What do you say?
Yeah, I don't.
2,500 or something?
I'm fine. I'm fine with even 5,000. I mean, honestly, with me, I mean, I think there's where we start talking about, the venue, the avenue, that you maybe have with the venue, where you brought up the venue, Aaron, that has. They redid the space. It's a wedding venue. Their note is $500 a month, and they haven't been able to book anything for the last X amount. So, 10 months is $5,000. So yeah, I'm fine with.
Well, Aaron, I would suggest, I guess, that you're starting at 1,000 was kind of just that as a starting point, because I agree that. That might not make enough of an impact on a business that's needing these funds. And a range, you could actually go from 1,000 up to the 25,000 that Councilman Lesser is talking about, because if we're going to do this, in my opinion, it has to be a significant assistance that makes a difference. Otherwise, we're just putting off an eventual closing of the business or something.
Yeah.
I think Glenda makes a good point there. If $1,000 is going to make the difference, then you're running that something bitch too thin. It's way too thin. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, that's the reality of it. And that's not helping the ones that we need to help.
Yeah. So I know we're running out of time because Mike's got to go in about 10 minutes, but the free business continuity education, that was something that I kind of, Glenda, took from what you had done with the other program that was out there, that I know you had helped folks with that type of thing, and so I put that in there thinking it might be a good resource. I'm not married to the idea, and then I did also think that it would be a good idea for us to maybe help folks find other grants and loans and apply for those as well, because I think there's a lot of folks that are slipping through the cracks just because they don't know what exists out there. I think Glenda does a great job, but I know that there are a lot of people that don't know that you and your job exist in Topeka, and they feel like they're in small business on their own, and don't realize that there's help available. And so I kind of wanted to put something in there that we would help folks apply for that stuff in some way.
Councilman Mays, with the business continuity program, or Commissioner Mays, I apologize.
That's all right.
With the business continuity program, we have that scheduled for one for the spring and one for the fall. So it'll be easy to put them in one or the other.
Okay.
If we were to do it, if that would become a criteria.
Yeah, I think personally, I think it's a good idea. I don't know that we need to make it mandatory, but I think that there's a lot of business owners out there that aren't, they haven't been to business school. And so it might be helpful for some of those folks to, get some good resources at no cost.
if
And
I'm,
I think too, you know, some of, you know, we looking at some of these, you know, the expenditures that we can do too is along the banking line too is, it costs money to go refinance, what is an appraisal, a title, so, all those type of things. I mean, I think there's things like that, could fall into that part of restructuring is doing that to get yourself in a position that you can cash flow, and sometimes that's taking advantage of lower interest rates and a longer amortization schedule, but you got to get a new appraisal, you got to get this, you got to do all those different things, and those things cost money that could really make a difference with some of these small guys.
if I may interject here, following up on Councilman Lesser's earlier comments, to speak briefly and move on. I like the conversation I hear. I looked at the agenda, and number 4 was action items, approval of grant parameters. I personally don't think we're that close yet anywhere to deciding on those parameters. Do I get that agreement or consensus from the commissioner and council member? And Linda, do you think we're anywhere near being able to put grant parameters completely into place? And I bring this up because I want to look at being able to, in following the agenda, at least speak to that, and then looking at number 4B, meeting schedule. I know that next week we have our JEDO full meeting, board meeting, and there will be a request and should be a report that this smaller group can update the full board on. But I would really like to be able to move to that part of the agenda where we schedule the next meeting, because I really feel that the mayor needs to be at the next meeting to follow up on some of the discussion that we have here. I want to make sure that there aren't any areas that had not been addressed completely in her absence. And so I'm asking the committee to be able to move forward with the agenda and number 4 with the approval of grant parameters. I don't know, is there any desire to make a motion to set specific grant parameters at this point? And hearing that.
No, I don't think we're that far along. I mean, I wish we could have met earlier. Obviously, there were some unforeseen circumstances that delayed us from really getting started on this. And so I think we probably need to make some sort of a presentation at JEDO, or at least have an open conversation about where we're at. But yeah, we need to schedule another meeting. I don't think there's any way that this is not ready for prime time.
No, I agree. I just wanted to follow up on what had been set by the agenda. So unless there's any other objection, I'd like to move to 4B, and that would be approval of the next meeting schedule. So if we can't do that right now, maybe I can ask Glenda to send out a Survey Monkey so that we can see when that next available date is. And let me get a consensus. Would you like to do it yet this month, within the month?
For me, I'd say the sooner the better.
Yeah.
I'd like to get this hammered out.
So would Councilman Lesser, would you agree? Yet this month sometime?
Yeah, I don't need, I'm trying to look at my calendar. I want to look at this. Like I said, I didn't get this. It probably did. We changed our spam filter, honestly. So it probably came and I didn't, whatever. So I kind of want to break this down, but I don't need that much time for the stuff that we talked about for me to be prepared to at least come back together. And I think after this meeting too, we're going to hear from some people too. So that'll give us some, I always like the input, I don't have all the answers. So,
And the other thing that I'll add is that Mike's right. We'll get input, but also we may know what the federal government's going to do. I mean, they already had one vote to move that process along for the next stimulus package. So we may know more what might also be in there for small businesses, et cetera, and make sure that we're not doubling up.
Absolutely.
And honestly, there's a possibility that next federal package includes money to local governments for this type of thing. So, there's a chance that we get the money to do this without taking it out of the JEDO coffers at some point too. So,
Yeah. Well, then it's agreed by consensus then. Glenda, I'll ask you if you'll put out a survey monkey
Mhm.
and see if
I'll
we
work
can
with
meet
Trey to get
yet
that
this
done.
month. Okay, and so that way we can move forward. Were there any public comments to be made here? I know that I think there was one document. Trey, did you send for somebody that wanted to be able to have that document available to the committee members?
Yes, and that has been forwarded to all the committee members, but there was no additional public comment at this time.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for this meeting. I really like the conversations. Aaron, thank you very much for that document. I think that's a good starting place, a good working document. And like Mr. Lesser, I will sit down and look at it over and think that through. And I know there are a couple of people that want to be talking to me about those categories. So I thank you very much. And Glenda, thank you also for bringing us up to speed. City Manager, thank you for being with us today. And I want to say I look forward to the next meeting. And I think there will be even more detailed conversations about what we're going to do. So unless there is anything further for this particular meeting, I see no hands raised.
No, the only thing I do want to say is, thank you for that, Aaron. That is a good document, to start from. I do appreciate that. Glenda, as always, thank you for the information. Very helpful. I think I would say, that information from Freddie, I wouldn't say don't have him kill himself on it, you know what I mean? But some basic impact, I think would be helpful, because that we may then want to move the bar, on awards and stuff, up or down, you know what I mean? So, but
I think Freddie may have a good idea of are those industries the most primarily affected. And so I think that would be as helpful as anything.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mike.
No. Thank you very much. And we have to say it. Go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs.
Run it back. This is
Okay, no.
meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
thanks.